You're dialed in to Truth HERTZ Radio with Charlie Chatters.
All right, listeners, welcome back aboard the listenership here at Truth HERTZ Radio. I'm your host, Charlie Chatters. That's right, we're back. It's January 30th of 2019. It is Hump Day. Well, for some. Hopefully for most. Middle of the week. For those of you looking forward to Friday, you are not far away. It is just around the corner. It's just on the other side of today. It will be here soon, and I too am looking forward to Friday and the weekend because in true Charlie Chatters style, as in feast or famine, sometimes we're used to not having any episodes at all, and other times, you know, when it rains, it pours. And I am working on a couple of brand new developments here for Truth HERTZ Radio with me, Charlie Chatters, right? Tomorrow I'm actually going to be working on networking with a new guest that will be appearing on the show out of New York City. That's right. A little bit of a mystery. Not going to say much about it until all my ducks are in a row and I've got all of my recordings situated and everything set aside. And secondly, I will be, as promised in earlier episodes, inviting my friend and producer, Scott, to the show. That's right. I'm going to be sitting in his studio, and we're going to be co-creating together a show, and we're going to be introducing kind of a new flavor to Charlie Chatters and Truth HERTZ Radio. I guess basically what I've been doing is, up until this point, everything has been in the Truth HERTZ Radio melting pot, as it were. All the ingredients are put in there. Some of the things I don't like, some of the things I do. I've scooped out some of which there's too much of and put in a little bit more of something else. And it looks like we've got a good base to work with. We're going to be reducing it down. We're going to be seasoning it, peppering it up, and we're going to be serving it fresh and piping hot, ready for your listening, ready for your enjoyment. That's right. Really working on some cool stuff here, and as mentioned, a couple of new guests that are going to be coming onto the show. So I thought I would come on today, as promised over the weekend, because I did have some technical issues. And ultimately, you know, I just kind of ran out of time. I had a lot of stuff going on in my own personal world and did my very best. And unfortunately, it didn't work out the way that I had wanted it to. C'est la vie. Isn't that right? That's just the way life goes sometimes. But we're rolling along here, and we're still doing our thing, or my thing. I'm still doing it, all right? Hopefully, I've got listeners out there. I used to hear a joke when I was a kid on one of the breakfast radio stations that I heard while in high school when riding the bus for over an hour long to get to school through these rural farmlands. And it was a long, long way. So we had the entertainment of a radio show, and I believe it was broadcasting from downtown Montreal, Quebec. It was called Chaume FM 97.5 with Terry DeMonte, and a rather salty character. But and that's kind of where I've taken a lot of my lead from. At any rate, I forget really where I was going with that. But yes, he used to make a joke about how all three of his listeners were hopefully on the line, dialed into the radio show and enjoying his very best. And that's my hope here, that I've got your attention. I'm still keeping you engaged. There are a couple of developments I want to talk about. I had been, for those of you paying enough attention to the Facebook page, might have caught wind that I had started a YouTube channel where I put up at least a couple of videos. I think I had done also the same on the Facebook page, put up a couple of videos with me in the studio doing these kinds of little mini podcasts, these mini rants. And I thought they were kind of neat, right? Now, I talked to, now I'm going to dedicate the next couple of minutes here to my friend and producer, Scott, because we had a brief conversation today. And let me preface this a little bit. I have been, constantly since I started this podcast, I work independently in my own shop. I spend hours throughout the day by myself. Nobody there, okay? Typically what I do to entertain myself is I put my headphones in. I started with music. I dealt with a little of the old 70s and 80s and reminisced and all the way through the 90s and into 2000s and right up until modern day with, most music today I can't even really stomach. So I got bored very, very quickly, and I thought, okay, what am I going to get onto next? I got onto some stand-up comics that were on iTunes, and then, of course, I got onto my podcasts. Some of the great and wonderful hosts that are out there bringing on mind-blowing guests who have just given me so much to think about throughout my day. Thank goodness, because I'd go nuts without it, right? Now, throughout this process, when I'm not entirely or 100% engaged in what I'm listening to, I spend a great deal of time thinking about how to improve my show, what content to drive it with, what kinds of guests to have on, whether or not to have guests, or just to do a solo show. You name it. I go through from step 1 through 1,000 and back again, and still just trying to figure out the recipe that will hopefully bring a great listenership, a broad listenership, and an incredible amount of creative abundance to my life. That's my goal. That's my purpose, right? Now, lately, what I have been stricken with is this idea that I still need to find what makes Charlie Chatters stand apart from the rest of the podcasts that are out there, right? How do I find my own niche market? Right. So I was spending today a lot of energy while the saws are buzzing and I'm doing my thing, and my phone rings. And I see that it's my friend Scott, and I'm in the middle of something. So the first time he calls, I hit decline, and I'm not able to answer the phone. He called back, I think it was about 30 minutes later. And I thought, you know what, it's kind of time for a 5-minute break, get off my feet, sit down for a minute, turn the saws off, and let the ringing in my head stop. At that point. So I pick up the phone and I have a quick chat with Scott, and we say, hello, how are you doing? And so I'm dedicating this portion of my show to Scott, because I've talked about in previous episodes about how when I'm looking for signs or indicators or road markers that would on a cosmic level suggest or lend direction to me on where I should be, no matter what I'm focusing on or what I'm asking of the universe. In this particular case, it happened to be about my podcast, my radio show, me as a radio talk host, right? And because this is something I really, really am thrilled and passionate about, but of course, I don't want it to fizzle away. And so in this brief conversation with my friend Scott, and this guy, he's got a funny way. He's always coming up with these expressions that, oddly enough, I've never heard before. I often think that he just makes them up on the spot and he has me rolling in laughter. But nonetheless, he made a couple of comments to me today. One was, you're swimming in too many ponds. Now, some of you might be familiar with that expression. I wasn't. And so, of course, I'm physically imagining myself swimming in a variety of these little ponds with frogs and lily pads and, koi fish and the rest of it. And he brought, he extrapolated on that. He brought a little more light to that. And what came into conversation as an example was my YouTube page, right? Which I thought to be, fairly an extension of creativity, right? Just a further extension for me to get my medium out there and to get my voice and my face out there and to draw a little more attention to what I'm doing, right? As we know, this is all built and based on, to a large degree, subscription of listeners, of an audience, right? And he said, although, I find the idea technologically of a YouTube video, attractive as the next big step, he says, I take you to be of altruistic nature, and he says, I don't think that you so much have dreams as you do goals. And I would surmise that they are realistic and attainable and these kinds of things, right? Of which I had to agree with Scott. He had me pegged right down. That's exactly how certainly I see myself, right? So now I have to relate this idea of swimming in many ponds. I'm out there frolicking in my let's say bright orange Speedo, and I'm out there in the lily pads and doing the backstroke and decide I've had enough of this pond and jump into the next pond. And then when I put that into a less physical example, it made a lot more sense to me. and the idea that I'm doing a podcast, and of course I'm trying to branch that and reach that out to a variety of different hosts and platforms, which you've all heard me mention more than a dozen times per show. As well with the addition, the YouTube channel. And so Scott basically asked me, he says, well, you know, there is a possibility that you're maybe feeling a little overwhelmed because you're swimming in too many ponds. You're trying to do too much at once, which could unfortunately lead to a saturation of sorts, or a dilution, right? Something that is concentrate, you know, out of the can. Charlie Chatters, Truth HERTZ Radio. Now we're diluting that, and I would certainly hate to see you lose interest in it. Anyway, I don't remember, you know, and I couldn't reiterate all of the specific details of our conversation, but that primarily struck me. It struck me. And I had to give thanks to Scott over the phone because, and although he's a very humble man, he doesn't need necessarily to take any credit for his own words or his own work, right? But he was, and I'm glad that he feels, and I feel the same, that we have a good enough friendship that we can be honest with each other. And how valuable is that, right? That's a big deal when people have the balls and they feel that they're in the position that they can say something, of course, knowing that it's going to be taken constructively and not as a personal insult or injury. And great conversation, and it just made sense to me. I thought, you know what? Damn, Scott, you're right. You're absolutely right. And you know, Scott and I haven't known each other very long, but obviously he's a very observant man. Obviously, he's been on the surface of this old green-skinned planet of ours for quite some time and dealt with enough people in his old life and his old career that he's a fairly good judge of character, I might add. Right? And he certainly had me pegged and helped on some occasions to remind me of things that maybe I had wanted to forget about myself, and other things I had no clue even existed. And it's sometimes nice because when you're going through a plethora of your own thoughts in your head, they can often seem kind of minced or fuzzy. And it's sometimes better if there's a second set of eyes and a second person to experience that which is you and bring it into clarity, bring it into focus, dial it in and say, well, this is what I see. This is what you're projecting. And this is what I'm reading. I may not be accurate, but this is my perspective, right? And perspective is everything, especially when it jives between people. So a bit synergistic, I got to tell you. And the really cool part about it was that because I have been asking the cosmos to give me some road signs, some markers, some indication of where I need to go next. Boom, phone rings. There's Scott, right? So I think it very important, you know, as much as I talk about manifesting the kind of life or the kind of matrix that you want to live in, it's also extraordinarily important to keep your eyes and ears open for the signs. You know, there's no sense asking questions of the cosmos if your ears are not open to receive the answers, right? So it's crucial that we stay tuned in and we pay attention and recognize. Because they're there. They're absolutely there. So there was my my little prop up to Scott, although, you know, he is the kind of humble man that would say, you know, that was completely unnecessary and you wasted 4 minutes of your life on me and, you know. But I wanted to give thanks to Scott on that one because it really did help me to get over a psychological hurdle that I've been struggling with specifically today. Now, moving on and moving forward, number one, I'm going to be working and co-creating with Scott this Friday. That's my hope. Now, it's set up tentatively based on his availability and my availability, and should no acts of God interrupt our plan to get together in his studio, we are going to be creating something with a new kind of flavor, right? We'll tell you more about that when that show actually gets launched, when that section of the episode. Typically what I do is I get together with my guests, I record our interviews or conversations, however you'd like to look at them, and then I insert them into the podcast as I create at that point in time. Now, creating the podcast outside of the recorded issues is not really that big a deal, you know. I play the intro, I do a little bit of intro talk, I insert the file, as it were, I do a little bit of talking on the outside, and then I play the outro, and away we go. These solo shows are a little bit more work because I'm not actually recording anything. Well, I am, but I'm not putting it aside. I'm building it all as as a build together. It's a do-it-yourself from start to finish, and everything has to be fluid. So if you hear me getting upset with myself because I've had too many ums and ahs, or even just a little bit of dead air, it's something I'm working on. It's something I have to practice at, because I'm not working with a script. I'm just working off the top of my crazy head, and I'm trying to fill up every second of the show, right, with just some Charlie Chatter nuttiness. Now, another, just to dial back a little bit further too, another comment that Scott did make to me, and I don't even think I got into it, was the idea about the YouTube videos. Now I'm really, this is part of the craziness of Truth Hurts Radio, right? It's Charlie jumping from one idea to the next, and I apologize. But maybe that's what you love so much about the show. Hopefully. Hopefully that's exactly what it is. So getting back to that YouTube, great idea, but I thought you wanted to be a radio podcaster. And he's absolutely right. That's exactly what I want to be. So he suggested to me, well, you're kind of ruining it for those who like to listen to talk radio. You're ruining it. You're telling them what you look like and what you're wearing and where you're sitting and, showing them the operation side. And you're taking away the mystique and the magic of it, And his idea was borrowed some credibility by a story that he told me about his grandfather, who used to listen to this very old and antique radio, and he'd listen to the hockey games on it. He still has the radio. It's propped up on a shelf above his fridge, and he often makes reference to it, and today it served itself well because it fit right into what I'm talking about. His grandfather used to sit and listen to the radio hockey, as I'm sure some of us have done in the past, whether we're traveling in the car or sitting at home and we just don't have access to maybe the right channel or, whatever the case may be. You've listened to hockey on the radio, and it can be pretty cool. I remember as a child, the old days, Dick Irving, right? He had a very, very signature voice, and it was someone that you knew once you heard Dick Irving, it was Saturday night, hockey night in Canada, right? So his grandfather listened to the hockey show on the radio, and I'm sure at some point he had the option to watch it on TV, but refused to. Because he liked the sound of the announcer's voice, and he loved the energy that was being driven. The content itself was being taken care of, but it was being narrated by a hockey official or a hockey commentator who knew the names on the back of every jersey, who could give you some stats, who knew when to break for commercial, who could point something out in the crowd, who could define with colorful explicitives and adjectives to create a stage and a backdrop for something you can't see. You can only imagine it, right? And the commentator was just that added bonus to this imaginary world that we are able to create when we are just listening to radio. And Scott said, don't lose that magic, because that's probably what you love most about this. I talk a lot about being creative, and I use the canvas and paints most commonly as my example. Well, there we go. I'm painting a picture, and hopefully I'm in your mind, I am using some wild colors, and I am just getting out there and I'm building something up. And I hope that I haven't ruined it by doing a couple of these little YouTube videos, because from today forward, I am going to cease and desist doing YouTube videos. I don't want to ruin the magic of it. And I'm already struggling with trying to find the path in which I must travel to continue this show. YouTube is not the avenue I need to take, is it? I don't think so. I want to keep the magic alive. I want my voice, as Scott would say, to have sparkle and life. And I want to leave room for your minds to create and imagine whatever it is that you need to create and imagine while listening to Charlie Chatters on Truth Hurts Radio. Okay? So enough about that. We're going to move on to the idea or the next guest that I'm actually working on. It's a phone call that I have to make tomorrow. And without building up too much about it, and I don't want to make too many promises. I've done this before where I get everybody all propped and hyped up, and it either doesn't work out, or there's no show, or the content was disappointing. Right? So, but tomorrow I do have a phone call, a conference call lined up with one of our future guests. She will be attending this phone call via New York City. That's right, in the United States. I actually had to go today to Bell and buy a Canada to USA long-distance package so that I didn't drive my bill right through the roof while making an hour-long conversation to the good old USA, right? So that's something to really look forward to. I'm not even going to tell you about the content or the theme of that show or the theme of her interests. I'd like to keep that as hush-hush as I can until I get the show slapped together and all my T's crossed and my I's dotted. All right? But anyway, we're going to just keep this brief. I just wanted to get on and make, I just wanted to put my voice out there. I wanted to make sure everybody could hear that I'm still doing what I'm doing, although it might be in old Charlie Chatters fashion. Interrupted, inconsistent, unexpected, surprising, but that's just the way I seem to do things, and hopefully it catches you off guard and you go, yes, all right, another episode, although short, another episode, a little more content to fill thine ears with. That's right. All right. Well, I thank you, listeners, for dialing back in. And please be sure to check us out on the Facebook page, Charlie Chatters at Truth HERTZ Radio. You can simply like the page. If you're not already a member of the page, like it. That will be notified to me, and then I'll take that opportunity to invite you directly in to the Charlie Chatters page where you can participate, hopefully, with a whole lot of activity that'll be going on there. Please be sure that if you're not finding us on Facebook, that you can query us on iTunes, Spotify, Spreaker Radio, iHeartRadio, and as well Patreon. For those who are able to go over and throw $1 in the chip jar, that would be great. If not, I will remind listeners, please, to continue participating in the Kindness Challenge, which is to commit to at least one random act of kindness per day, just one. And keep an eye out for that universal wink or that indicator that says you're on the right path, you're doing the right thing. Start with one. That's all it takes, right? In future episodes, hopefully I'll come up with my own branding, my own signature for this challenge. Until then, we're just going to borrow the one from a previous guest, and we'll call it the Kindness Challenge. That's what we'll do. All right, listeners. Well, we're gonna go out with a bang, old school. We're gonna kick this up with the old Charlie Chatters Talk Radio intro, and be sure to dial back in. Be sure to stay tuned because we're going to be having some great episodes coming up. I'll be working diligently over the next few days to ensure that I drive some content your way. All right. Thanks for dialing in to Truth HERTZ Radio. I'm your host, Charlie Chatters.
Charlie Chatters on his talk radio.